All right, let's jump into one of the most volatile situations, I guess we could say, in the world today,
Yeah,
the Iran-Israel conflict.
right.
You've probably seen the headlines and wondered, like, how did things get so
Oh, for
tense?
sure.
And so that's exactly what we're going to do today.
Okay.
We're going to go beyond the headlines to unpack what's driving this seemingly intractable conflict.
Okay.
We're going to look at the history, the motivations, and the key events that have brought us to this point,
Sounds good.
and really try to understand like how we got to this place.
Yeah, it's interesting because this level of tension wasn't always there.
Right.
It might surprise you to learn that Iran and Israel weren't always enemies.
Yeah, looking at the situation today, it's hard to imagine them ever being anything but sworn enemies.
Exactly right. But under the Shah, Iran's last monarch,
Hmm.
the relationship was actually quite different.
Okay.
They were neutral, even friendly at times.
Huh.
Think about it. During the Cold War,
Yeah.
both countries saw the Soviet Union as a major threat. And, sometimes a shared enemy can bring even unlikely partners together.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So when did things take such a dramatic turn?
Well, the year 1979 was really pivotal.
Okay.
The Islamic Revolution, led by Ayatollah Khomeini, completely transformed Iran's identity and foreign policy.
Okay.
Khomeini's ideology was fiercely anti-Israel. He saw the state of Israel as completely illegitimate,
Hmm.
an imposition on the Muslim world.
Right.
Almost overnight, diplomatic ties were severed and the rhetoric became incredibly hostile.
And it wasn't just words.
No,
Things escalated pretty quickly beyond that.
absolutely.
Yeah.
One of the key shifts was Iran's decision to support groups that opposed Israel throughout the region.
Okay.
Groups like the Palestinian Liberation Organization, the PLO Hamas in Gaza, and Hezbollah in Lebanon.
Right.
They also provided crucial support to the Syrian regime under Bashar al-Assad, who was a key ally against Israel.
Okay, so this is what's known as proxy warfare. Fighting a war without actually directly fighting a war. So what's the advantage of that for Iran?
Well, exactly.
Hmm.
It allows Iran to exert influence and pursue its goals in the region without directly engaging in a full-scale war with Israel,
Right.
which could be very costly.
Makes sense.
These proxy groups act as extensions of Iranian influence, allowing them to challenge Israeli interests and project power throughout the region.
Okay.
And for the groups themselves, they receive vital funding weapons and training from Iran, allowing them to sustain their operations against Israel.
So how has Israel responded to this strategy?
Israel has taken a multifaceted approach.
Okay.
They've targeted Iranian-backed groups militarily through intelligence operations.
Mm.
They've also invested heavily in cyber warfare and espionage, aiming to disrupt Iran's activities and gather intelligence.
Right.
There have even been allegations of Israel supporting opposition groups within Iran itself, adding another layer of complexity to the situation.
And of course, we can't talk about the Iran-Israel conflict without addressing Iran's nuclear program,
Right.
which has been a major point of contention.
Absolutely. Iranian leadership has made statements about Israel's destruction. And those statements combined with the nuclear program have created a constant fear
Right.
for Israel and its allies
Yeah.
that Iran could acquire nuclear weapons.
Right.
And so the international community has tried to contain this program through sanctions diplomacy and even a sophisticated cyber attack known as Stuxnet, which temporarily set back Iran's progress.
And then there were those incredibly daring and controversial assassinations of Iranian nuclear scientists.
Right.
That really adds another layer of intrigue and danger to the situation.
Yes, those alleged assassinations show just how high the stakes are
Right.
and how far both sides are willing to go.
Yeah.
It highlights the fact that this conflict extends far beyond conventional warfare.
So how did we get from there to where we are now?
Well-
Because things seem to have escalated dramatically, even just in the last few years.
Yeah, a major turning point was the Hamas attack on Israel
Yeah.
in October 2023.
Right.
The scale of the attack was unprecedented. Over 1,000 Israelis were killed and hundreds taken hostage.
Wow.
Israel's response was swift and devastating, leading to widespread destruction in Gaza
Yeah.
and further entrenching this cycle of violence.
And so what was Iran's role in all of this?
Well,
Feels like they've been more directly involved than ever before.
Iran's mobilization of its allies, which they refer to as the Axis of Resistance, was a significant development.
Okay.
This axis includes groups like the Houthi rebels in Yemen,
Uh-huh.
Iraqi Shiite militias, and of course Hezbollah.
Right.
Their involvement demonstrated a shift in Iran's approach. It signaled a willingness to escalate beyond the traditional proxy warfare tactics.
And this leads us to April 2024,
Yeah.
the first direct Iranian attack on Israeli soil.
Right.
An annex to the Iranian embassy in Damascus was targeted during a high-level military meeting.
Right.
That was a huge escalation.
It was a watershed moment,
Yeah.
a real game changer. The attack, which resulted in the death of a prominent Iranian general, demonstrated a level of boldness and aggression from Iran that hadn't been seen before.
And of course, Israel retaliated.
Yes, as expected.
Right.
Israel responded with airstrikes on Iranian targets near Isfahan, including a radar site linked to the Natanz nuclear facility. It felt like both sides understood the gravity of the situation, and for a while there was a period of relative calm.
But that calm didn't last long. It seems like Hezbollah has been in Israel's crosshairs ever since.
You're right, Israel has become increasingly assertive in targeting Hezbollah,
Okay.
viewing them as the most potent and immediate threat on their northern border.
Right.
We've seen them disrupting Hezbollah's communication systems, targeting key leadership figures, attacking weapons depots, and most recently launching an invasion of Lebanon aimed at pushing Hezbollah forces further north.
And the killing of Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran,
Right.
that must have been a devastating blow for both Hamas and Iran.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It was a symbolic blow, demonstrating Iran's vulnerability
Yeah.
and their inability to protect their allies,
Yeah.
even within their own borders. This was a major turning point, further escalating tensions and setting the stage for even greater confrontation.
Which brings us to Iran's retaliation.
Yeah.
Another direct missile attack on Israeli military and strategic targets in October 2024.
Right.
It feels like things are spiraling out of control.
It's certainly a dangerous escalation. This latest attack raises some serious questions.
Like what?
Well, will we see even bolder actions from Iran, perhaps targeting Israel's nuclear or oil facilities?
Right.
And how will Israel respond to such provocations?
It's a very precarious situation, and the stakes are incredibly high.
Yeah,
We've covered a lot of ground here,
we have.
but we're just getting started.
Right.
What's particularly concerning is the potential for miscalculation on either side.
Yeah.
It feels like one wrong move could lead to a much wider conflict.
It's a very tense situation with very little room for error. Both sides have significant military capabilities and have shown a willingness to use them.
Yeah.
So, you often hear about Iran's ballistic missiles.
Right.
How much of a threat do they actually pose to Israel?
And I think that's where we should pick up when we come back for part 2.
Sounds good.
Okay. Welcome back. Before the break, we were talking about Iran's ballistic missile program.
Right.
And, kind of posing the question, like, how much of a threat do they actually pose to Israel?
Yeah. Well, Iran has spent years developing their ballistic missile program.
Okay.
They've got a range of missiles that can travel different distances, carry various payloads,
Right.
some even capable of reaching Israel.
Right.
This is a serious concern because these missiles can be equipped with conventional explosives.
Right.
And in the future, there's a potential for them to carry nuclear warheads.
So knowing all that, how does Israel plan to defend itself against these potential threats?
Well, Israel has invested significantly in a multi-layered missile defense system.
Okay.
You probably heard of the Iron Dome,
Well,
designed to intercept short-range rockets.
Right.
And then there's the Arrow system, which can intercept ballistic missiles.
Okay.
These systems have proven to be effective in the past, but they're not foolproof.
Right.
If Iran launched a massive missile attack, it's likely that some would get through,
Right.
potentially causing a lot of damage.
It's a chilling thought. But beyond the threat of missiles, what about other types of conflict?
Yeah.
I've heard about the potential for cyber warfare
Right.
and attacks on critical infrastructure like oil facilities.
Yeah.
What can you tell us about those?
Cyber warfare is already a major component of this conflict. Both Iran and Israel have highly sophisticated cyber capabilities.
Right.
We've seen them using these capabilities to disrupt each other's infrastructure, steal sensitive information. And yes, the potential for attacks on critical infrastructure is a very real concern.
Right.
Imagine Iran targeting Israel's oil and gas facilities.
Right.
Or their desalination plants, which are crucial for their water supply. And on the flip side, Israel could target Iran's nuclear facilities or its energy grid.
Right.
These types of attacks could cripple a country's economy and create widespread chaos.
So it's not just a traditional battlefield anymore. It's
Yeah.
a conflict that's happening in the digital world.
Right.
And through sabotage of essential services.
Right.
That adds a whole other layer of complexity and danger to this.
Absolutely. It's a new kind of warfare, one that's extremely difficult to defend against.
Right.
And can have devastating consequences.
So let's zoom out a bit.
Right.
We talked a lot about Iran and Israel.
Right.
But this conflict has the potential to draw in other countries and groups.
Yeah.
We touched on Iran's axis of resistance earlier.
Right.
Can you explain that a bit more and how it could impact the situation?
Yeah, I think that's a good point.
Yeah.
It's not just a conflict between two nations.
Right.
It's something that could potentially ignite a much larger regional war.
Right.
If the situation were to escalate dramatically, Iran's allies, Hezbollah Shia militias in Iraq, and even the Houthis in Yemen could all be drawn into the conflict.
Yeah.
Imagine multiple fronts opening up simultaneously, creating an unpredictable and chaotic situation.
And what about the role of global powers like the United States?
Yeah.
They've been a strong ally of Israel for a long time. How do you think they would react to a major escalation?
Well, the U.S. has a very complex relationship with both Iran and Israel.
Right.
They've imposed sanctions on Iran, provided significant military support to Israel, and have a strong interest in preventing Iran from developing nuclear weapons.
Right.
It's hard to say for certain how they would respond to a major escalation, but it's very possible that they would be drawn into the conflict.
Right.
That could involve direct military action or increased support to Israel.
And what about Russia?
Yeah.
Their influence in the Middle East, particularly in Syria, has been growing.
Right.
What role do they play in all of this?
Well, Russia has become a key player in the Syrian civil war, supporting the Assad regime, which, as we've discussed, is also an ally of Iran.
Right.
Their interests in the region are complex, and they've tried to maintain a balance between their relationships with Iran and Israel.
Okay.
However, a major conflict between these two countries could force them to choose sides, further complicating an already volatile situation.
So we have this incredibly dangerous combination of powerful adversaries.
Yes.
With advanced weaponry, a web of fragile alliances, and the potential for global powers to be drawn in.
Right.
It feels like the world is holding its breath, waiting to see what happens next.
It's definitely a recipe for disaster. This situation requires careful attention. And diplomacy.
Right.
The consequences of a full-scale war between Iran and Israel would be catastrophic, not just for those two countries, but for the entire region and potentially the world.
So where do we go from here? Is there any hope for de-escalation?
Right.
Or are we on a path towards something truly devastating?
That's the big question, isn't it?
Yeah.
Right now, the outlook is pretty grim.
Yeah.
There's a lot of mistrust on both sides.
Right.
And both seem determined to achieve their objectives, even if it means risking a wider conflict.
Right. It almost feels like they're both playing a very dangerous game of chicken.
Yeah, it's a very high-stakes game with potentially devastating consequences.
Yeah. Maybe that's something we can delve into more after the break.
Okay.
There has to be some hope for diplomacy and peace.
Right.
So we were talking about the urgent need, I guess we could say, for diplomacy and trying to find a way to de-escalate this situation between Iran and Israel, because the alternative is just too horrible to even contemplate.
It's true. The consequences of a full-blown war in the Middle East would be felt all over the globe. We're talking about a region that's absolutely vital to the world's energy supply. Any disruption there, whether it's through direct attacks on oil facilities or just wider instability, would send shockwaves through the global economy. I mean, we could see skyrocketing fuel prices, economic recession, and even political upheaval all over the world.
And let's not forget about the human cost. We've seen the destabilizing effects of mass migration in recent years. A war in this region would likely displace millions of people. Put a huge strain on neighboring countries and potentially even fuel new conflicts.
The refugee crisis would be immense. And we can't ignore the potential for increased terrorism. A wider conflict could create a breeding ground for extremist groups to exploit the chaos, recruit new members, and launch attacks far beyond the Middle East.
It's a stark reminder that what happens in one part of the world can have ripple effects across the entire globe. This isn't just about Iran and Israel. It's about global security, economic stability, and the interconnectedness of our world.
Absolutely. It underscores the fragility of the world we live in. And how events in one region can have such far-reaching consequences.
So, given everything we've discussed so far, what can be done?
Yeah.
What does this all mean for someone listening to this right now?
Right.
It can feel really overwhelming
Yeah.
and like there's nothing we can do.
It's easy to feel powerless in a situation like this.
Right.
But I think awareness is the first step.
Okay.
Understanding the complexity of the conflict, the motivations of the players involved,
Right.
and the potential global consequences is crucial.
Right.
We can't afford to turn away.
So staying informed and engaged is vital. What else can people do?
Well, we can engage in thoughtful discussions about these issues,
Right.
challenge our own assumptions, and demand that our leaders prioritize peaceful solutions.
Right.
We need to encourage dialogue diplomacy and a commitment to de-escalation.
So it sounds like you're saying that knowledge is power.
Yeah.
But it's only truly powerful when we use it to advocate for change.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a thought to ponder. We've talked about the deep historical roots of this conflict, the mistrust, the ideology, the web of alliances.
Yeah.
But I wonder, are there any historical parallels to this type of escalating proxy conflict? How did those situations ultimately play out?
Right.
Were there missed opportunities for de-escalation?
Yeah.
Or specific actions that led to either peace or war?
Interesting.
I encourage you to explore those questions.
Yeah.
Looking at history might give us some valuable insights into how to navigate the present.
Yeah, that's a fascinating challenge.
Right.
It reminds us that even though this situation might feel unique, we can learn from the past.
Absolutely.
And hopefully avoid repeating the mistakes of history.
Exactly. History might not repeat itself exactly, but it often rhymes.
That's a good one.
So keep learning.
Yeah.
Stay engaged and keep striving for a better, more peaceful world.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep questioning, keep learning, and keep the conversation going.